Imagine walking into the elevator of an expensive apartment building in São Paulo, carrying several suitcases. Security cameras capture you leaving. Nothing unusual about that. Except the night before, your husband entered that apartment. And according to those same cameras, he never came back out. Days later, human remains begin appearing along roads outside São Paulo. And investigators slowly realize that the missing man isn't just another wealthy businessman. He's Marcos Matsunaga, an executive connected to one of Brazil's largest food companies. And the woman carrying those suitcases, his wife, Elize Matsunaga. Tonight, we're going to talk about a relationship that began through an Escort website, transformed into an extraordinary life of wealth, and ended with one of Brazil's most infamous murders. Welcome to the podcast, You Can't Unhear. Elize Araujo Quitano Matsunaga was born in 1981 in Chopinzinho, a small town in Paraná, Brazil. Her childhood was difficult. Her father, an alcoholic and abusive man, abandoned the family when Elize and her sister were young to start a new family elsewhere. At 15, living with her mother, two sisters and stepfather, Elize's already fragile world completely shattered when her stepfather raped her. When she told her mother what happened, her mother chose to believe her husband instead. He claimed that Elize had tried to seduce him. Her mother slapped her, threw her out of the house, and told her to go live with her grandmother. But Elize didn't go to her grandmother's house. Instead, she went to her godmother's, borrowed 50 reais, and disappeared into the night. Still just a teenager, she found herself living along the highways of the countryside. When the money ran out, she turned to prostitution with truck drivers, an experience that left her deeply traumatized and humiliated. Eventually, the Federal Highway Police found her during an operation against child sexual exploitation and brought her back home. But Elize was never the same person. She started psychological counseling, returned to school, and got a job at a law office. The traumas remained buried, but never truly healed. She never told anyone what she had experienced during those months away from home. In 1999, just before turning 18, Elize realized she needed to leave if she wanted to make something of her life. Still not reconciled with her mother, she moved to Curitiba, the capital of Paraná, determined to build a new identity for herself. She started living in a boarding house for young women, enrolled in a technical nursing program, and began working in the surgical center of a large hospital, while also caring for terminal patients during private home visits. It was at that hospital that she met a nurse who would change the trajectory of her life. This nurse lived a double life, working exhausting hospital shifts during the day, but also meeting clients as an escort whenever possible. This allowed her to maintain a high standard of living that caught Elize's attention. Seeing everything her friend had, Elize wanted the same for herself. The two became close, and the nurse promised to help her enter this new profession. Elize falsified her salary statement, changing it from 1,200 to 11,200 reais, which allowed her to get a credit card with a 35,000 real limit. She went to the mall, completely renewed her wardrobe, and transformed her appearance. The shy, insecure girl from the countryside gave way to Kelly, confident, seductive, and sophisticated. After renting an apartment to receive clients, her friend began referring customers to Elize in exchange for a commission. However, an involvement with a politician eventually put her safety at risk and generated a scandal. In 2004, at age 23, Elize decided to move to São Paulo, a city large enough to start life over. By the time she moved to São Paulo, Elize was working as an escort. Life in the enormous city was lonely. Elize barely spoke with her family and had few friends. Deep down, she held on to hope that some wealthy client would fall in love with her, marry her, and take her out of that life. And that was how she met Marcos Matsunaga. Marcos came from an entirely different world. He was an executive at Yoki, the Brazilian food company founded by his family. Quiet and discreet in public, Marcos was already married and had a daughter when he met Elize through an Escort website. However, Marcos had several vices, some relatively harmless like wine and Legos, others more questionable like hunting, firearms, and escorts. As a company director, Marcos earned about 31,000 reais per month. But that wasn't enough to support his lifestyle, so he created a parallel export business within the company that generated millions of dollars annually. He also suffered from satyriasis, an intense sexual compulsion, and displayed what psychologists call love-shyness syndrome, which made flirting and romantic pursuit difficult. Marcos preferred women he could impress or control. His marriage reflected this dynamic. He had married a simple woman of humble origin who worked in one of Yoki's factories. His relationships usually involved escorts or women far below his financial status. What began as a paid encounter became an affair, and eventually, Marcos left his marriage. He and Elize became a couple. They married. And suddenly, the woman who had grown up with very little was living inside an almost unimaginable world of privilege. Expensive restaurants, international travel, wine, luxury property, hunting trips. The couple also shared an interest in firearms. Marcos had a deep fear of kidnappings and robberies, so he always carried a gun and kept firearms scattered throughout the house. Elize received many gifts from Marcos: the deed to one of the penthouses, a pet snake, an armoured car, jewellery, designer bags, clothes and shoes. She was named beneficiary of his life insurance policy worth 600,000 reais. They travelled around the world, always in first class. Marcos enjoyed showing Elize the world she had never known: luxury, breathtaking landscapes and fine dining. Some trips were for tourism, others were hunting expeditions where they hunted deer and wild boar in places like Mato Grosso and British Columbia. It was during those trips that Elize learned how to butcher animals, never imagining that skill would one day serve such a sinister purpose. From the outside, it looked like an extraordinary transformation. But behind the apartment doors, the marriage was deteriorating. Elize would later describe Marcos as jealous and controlling. He allowed friendships only with classmates, forced her to change her phone number, controlled what she wore, and didn't allow male friends. The marriage became even more troubled. Elize suspected Marcos was cheating. During a trip, Elize checked Marcos's Skype and saw compromising conversations with a Yoki employee. She suspected he was having an affair and confronted him. They argued, but Marcos managed to calm the situation down. But Elize never forgot. Elize couldn't become pregnant naturally, so the couple began fertility treatments. Between arguments, medical appointments, and hormonal treatments, she finally became pregnant. But even during the pregnancy, conflicts continued. According to Elize, Marcos was often rude and unsympathetic to the difficulties she faced. When the baby was born, a girl, Elize had finally fulfilled her greatest dream of becoming a mother. For a time, the couple experienced harmony again. The house now had a newborn daughter and 2 small dogs. Marcos wasn't someone who liked arguments or confrontations. Instead, he would become cold, distant, and emotionally inaccessible. In that silence, Elize's suspicions grew. Even after marriage and their daughter's birth, he continued drifting away from his wife, just as he had in his first marriage. Eventually, suspicion wasn't enough. She hired a private investigator. The investigator followed Marcos and obtained evidence that he was seeing another woman. The photos and videos she received from the investigator completely changed the course of her story and Brazilian criminal history. Elize was no longer dealing with suspicions. She had confirmation. She had traveled to visit family specifically to give Marcos the opportunity to meet his mistress, so the investigator could document everything. When the detective called confirming the affair, Elize asked what her husband's mistress looked like. The answer was blunt. "She's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen." Consumed by rage, Elize returned to São Paulo on May 19, 2012. Marcos picked her up at the airport, which caused him to be late for a meeting regarding the sale of a company, a $1 billion negotiation with General Mills. When they arrived at the apartment, Elize ordered pizza, and Marcos went downstairs to pick it up. Building cameras would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. Marcos was recorded leaving the apartment briefly to collect pizza. He returned. After that, the cameras never recorded him leaving the building alive. Inside the apartment, Elize confronted him about the affair. The atmosphere was already tense when he said he'd have to leave again for an emergency meeting. According to her account, they began arguing. Elize said she knew everything, that she'd hired a private investigator and had proof of his infidelity. What happened during the argument became one of the central disputes at her trial. Elize said Marcos became aggressive. She claimed he insulted her, threatened her, and suggested he could take their daughter away. According to Elize, the confrontation escalated. There were firearms inside the apartment, and at some point, Elize picked up a gun. She fired once. Marcos was shot in the head. He was 42 years old. But this is where the case changes. Because whatever happened during that argument, Elize didn't call the police. She didn't call an ambulance. Instead, she began figuring out how to make Marcos disappear. After the shooting, Elize moved Marcos's body while waiting for their daughter to fall asleep. She later dismembered him. The remains were divided between bags and suitcases. Then, Elize left the building. The security cameras recorded her carrying luggage into the elevator. And over the following hours, portions of Marcos's remains were abandoned around the Cotia region outside São Paulo. Then Elize returned to normal life. Or at least, she tried to. She initially suggested Marcos had simply disappeared. Considering what she had just discovered about his affair, there was an obvious story available. Perhaps Marcos had left her. But Marcos disappearing at that particular moment created another problem, because something enormous was happening around his family's company. Yoki was in the process of being acquired by American food giant General Mills. Contemporary reports valued the deal at roughly 2 billion reais. Marcos had responsibilities, meetings, business obligations. People were expecting him. This wasn't someone who could simply vanish without questions being asked. And soon, the questions became much darker. On May 21st, human remains were discovered outside São Paulo. More were found afterward. Eventually, investigators were able to identify the victim. It was Marcos. Now police went back to the apartment. And the building's cameras told a very simple story. Marcos entered, went downstairs for pizza, returned upstairs, and Marcos never walked out again. Elize did, with luggage. Investigators also examined phone records and other physical evidence. The walls were closing in. On June 4th, Elize was arrested. 2 days later, she confessed. She admitted shooting Marcos, dismembering and disposing of his body. The question was no longer who killed Marcos Matsunaga. Everyone knew. The question became, why? For prosecutors, this wasn't simply a terrified wife reacting to a sudden threat. They argued there was another possible motive sitting beneath the marriage: money. Marcos belonged to an extraordinarily wealthy family, and Elize had gone from poverty to a life most people could barely imagine. If the marriage ended, that life could change dramatically. The prosecution questioned whether the killing was truly spontaneous. Elize's defense told a different story. They argued that years of emotional conflict, humiliation, and betrayal culminated in one catastrophic confrontation. Elize maintained that she did not plan to kill Marcos. And that distinction mattered enormously because the killing itself was admitted. The courtroom battle was about what was happening in Elize's mind when she pulled the trigger. Was this calculated, or was this an explosive act during a volatile argument? In 2016, 4 years after Marcos's death, a jury convicted Elize of qualified homicide and concealment of a corpse. She received a sentence of approximately 19 years and 11 months. In 2019, Brazil's Superior Court of Justice reduced that sentence to 16 years and 3 months, recognizing her confession. But another twist was still coming. Elize didn't remain behind bars for the full sentence. After approximately 10 years in custody, she was granted parole in May 2022. She began rebuilding her life outside prison. Brazilian reporting later found her trying to support herself through ordinary work, including work as an app-based driver. The glamorous world surrounding Marcos Matsunaga was gone. But there was something else Elize had lost long before she walked out of prison: her daughter. After Elize's arrest, the child was raised by Marcos's family. Elize has publicly said that she has not maintained a relationship with her daughter. And perhaps that's the strangest ending to this entire story. Because Elize has spoken extensively about Marcos, about the marriage, about the betrayal, the shooting, prison. She even participated in the 2021 Netflix documentary, Elize Matsunaga, Once Upon a Crime, where she gave her first major interview about the case. But there is one person who may eventually ask questions that no documentary can answer: her daughter. The child who lost her father because her mother killed him. And that is why the Elize Matsunaga case remains so uncomfortable. There isn't much mystery about what happened. Elize admitted killing Marcos. The evidence established that Marcos entered the apartment and never left alive. The mystery is about Marcos's version of what happened inside that apartment. Maybe that's the part of this story that's hardest to package into a headline. Elize spent years trying to escape the life she was born into, and eventually entered a life she once could only have imagined. But one night in May 2012, inside a luxury apartment overlooking São Paulo, everything collapsed, and she lost everything. Thanks for joining tonight. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the podcast, You Can't Unhear.